A hospital director fired her for saving a dying Marine, not for failing him, not for hesitating, for saving him. At Hawthorne Ridge Medical Center just after midnight, rain hammered the ambulance bay while a young Marine bled out under white trauma lights. 3 doctors argued over policy. One administrator worried about liability, and one quiet ER nurse, Ava Carson, saw the truth no one wanted to say. He had seconds left. So she reached for the scalpel. What happened next should have made her a hero. Instead, it cost her badge, her job, and the quiet life she had spent years trying to protect. But minutes later, a Navy helicopter landed on the roof, and everyone in that hospital learned Ava was not just a nurse. Watch until the end. Like the video and comment where you're watching from. The helicopter did not circle. It came down through the rain with the confidence of something that had already been cleared by people far above the hospital director's pay grade. Its landing lights swept across the glass walls of the lobby, flashing over vending machines, plastic chairs, tired families, and the dark red smear Ava Carson had left on the floor without noticing it. Blood from the Marine. Blood from the life she had just saved. Ava stood 20 feet from the front doors with her duffel bag hanging from one shoulder and her fired badge still lying somewhere behind her on the nurse's station counter. For one quiet second, she looked like any exhausted ER nurse at the end of a brutal shift. Pale face, damp hair pulled back too tight, jacket half-zipped over scrubs that should have gone into a biohazard bin. Then the rotor wash hit the roof hard enough to shake dust loose from the ceiling vents, and the woman under the scrubs came back. Her posture changed first. Not much, just enough. Her shoulders dropped, her breathing slowed, her weight settled evenly over both feet. Her eyes moved to the exits, then to the stairwell doors, then to the security desk, then to the reflection in the lobby glass behind her. The young receptionist stared upward. A security guard whispered, "Is that Navy Ava?" did not answer. She knew the sound before anyone saw the aircraft. Heavy naval rotor profile. Not civilian medevac. Not state police. Not National Guard. Too steady for a mercy flight, too deliberate for confusion. Someone had come here on purpose, and Ava had spent nearly 3 years making sure no one had a reason to come for her. Hawthorne Ridge Medical Center sat on the north edge of Millstone, Virginia, where the town lights thinned out and the marshland began. In daylight, the hospital looked respectable enough. 4 main floors, a new cardiac wing that donors liked to photograph, a glass entryway with polished stone floors, and a bronze plaque listing names of people who had never worked a night shift in their lives. After midnight, it was different. The coffee went stale. The corridors got longer, the machines sounded louder, families slept upright in waiting room chairs with coats folded under their heads. Nurses moved with soft shoes and tired eyes, carrying entire worlds in plastic medication cups, lab slips, and whispered updates at bedside. Ava had learned the building's rhythm within her first week. She knew which elevator hesitated on the 2nd floor before the doors opened. She knew which supply room had the good tape, the kind that held during sweat and panic. She knew the old stairwell behind radiology smelled like copper when it rained. She knew the emergency generator transfer panel sat behind a locked gray door in the West Service corridor, even though nobody had shown it to her. That was how she lived. Quietly, carefully, with maps in her head. When she had applied to Hawthorne Ridge 16 months earlier, she had shown the hiring office exactly what they needed to see. A valid Virginia nursing license, trauma certification, clean background check, no criminal history, excellent clinical references that said just enough and not a word more. The woman in human resources had smiled at her over a paper cup of tea. "You have military medical experience." Ava had kept her face pleasant. "Some." "What branch Navy?" "Hospital Corps." "Yes." The woman had clicked through the file and nodded, already losing interest. "Well, we love veterans here." Ava had nearly smiled at that. People loved veterans when they arrived in pressed uniforms for fundraisers. They loved them in framed photos near flag displays. They loved them when they could clap for them in ballrooms and move on before the silence afterward became uncomfortable. They did not always know what to do with a veteran who scanned rooftops without thinking, slept badly, and could still smell burning plastic when the rest of the room smelled only of bleach. So Ava had learned to become useful instead of known. She took night shifts. She volunteered for trauma coverage. She never asked for favors. She never joined workplace gossip. She kept extra socks in her locker, protein bars in her bag, and a small notebook full of names she refused to forget. Most people at Hawthorne Ridge thought she was private. A few thought she was cold. Nora Maddox knew better. Nora had been charge nurse on nights for 11 years, which meant she had survived administrators' budget cuts, dangerous residents, arrogant surgeons, and the slow emotional erosion of watching good nurses break because hospitals praised compassion while scheduling it into 12-hour shifts without lunch. She was broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, and impossible to impress. She wore her reading glasses on a chain and could silence an entire nurse's station by looking over the top of them. The first time Ava had worked under her, a construction worker came into the ER with a crushed hand and a blood pressure that fell through the floor without warning. The resident froze. The new nurse dropped a tray. Ava stepped in, set 2 lines, called for blood, packed the wound, and gave the resident 3 calm instructions before anyone realized she had taken control of the room. Afterward, Nora found her washing blood out from under her fingernails. "You always this quiet after making everybody else look slow." Ava had turned off the faucet. "I wasn't trying to make anyone look slow." "I know." Nora had leaned against the counter and studied her. "That's what worries me." Since then, Nora had watched her the way good charge nurses watched dangerous weather, not with fear, but with respect. She saw the way Ava counted people in a room. She saw how Ava always knew where the crash cart was, even if another nurse had moved it. She saw the way Ava talked to frightened patients, low and steady, never sweet in a fake way, never rushed. There was a tenderness in Ava, but it had walls around it, thick ones. Tonight those walls had cracked in Trauma Bay 3. Nora had been at the central station when the Marine came in. She had heard the EMS report over the radio. Male 25 gunshot wound to the chest pressure falling. Decreased breath sounds, possible cardiac involvement. She had seen Ava look up from a chart before the ambulance doors even opened. Something had passed across Ava's face. Not surprise. Recognition of the kind of night that asks for everything. Now, after the firing, Nora came down the hall toward the lobby with her hands clenched at her sides. She had taken off her glasses, which meant she was furious enough not to care that the world blurred beyond 10 feet. Ava. Ava did not turn right away. Her eyes remained on the ceiling on the faint tremor of the lights as the helicopter settled above them. Nora stopped beside her and lowered her voice. "Tell me you're not actually leaving. I'm not on staff anymore. That man is a suit with a pulse. He doesn't get to decide what kind of nurse you are. He already decided what kind of employee I am." Nora's mouth tightened. Behind them, families shifted in the waiting room. A little boy in dinosaur pajamas held a paper cup of water with both hands and stared at Ava's bloody shoes. An older man in a ball cap kept looking from the ceiling to the doors as if the helicopter might come through the front entrance. Nora followed Ava's gaze upward. "What is this?" Ava's answer came too late. "I don't know." Nora knew her well enough to hear the lie. "Ava." The sound of her name pulled something human back into Ava's eyes. For a moment, the ER noise seemed to fade. The phones, the overhead vents, the rain on the glass, the far-off thump of rotor blades slowing above them. Nora saw exhaustion then, not the kind that came from one bad shift. The older kind. The kind a person carries so long it becomes part of their posture. "You saved him." Nora said. Ava looked toward the trauma hallway. Is he stable? Yes. ICU is prepping. His pressure is holding. Good. That's all you're going to say. Ava adjusted the strap on her bag. It's the only thing that matters. Nora stepped in front of her. No, it's not. Ava met her eyes. Nora's voice dropped. I watched you put your hands into that boy's chest like you were reaching into a drawer you had opened 100 times before. I watched 3 doctors forget how to breathe while you kept working. Then Strickland walked in and fired you because your competence made him look useless. Ava said nothing. Nora searched her face. Who are you really? The question landed harder than Ava wanted it to. She had been asked versions of it before. In debrief rooms, in hospital interviews, by men with flags behind them and women with clipboards, by strangers who saw scars and wanted stories, by kind people who did not understand that some doors once opened did not close cleanly again. Ava looked at the rain sliding down the lobby glass. I was trying very hard to be nobody. Nora's expression softened, but she did not get to answer. The stairwell door at the end of the lobby opened. 2 men stepped out. They were not in uniform. Dark jackets, plain clothes, close haircuts that pretended not to be military and failed. They moved through the lobby without hurry, but space opened around them anyway. One scanned the room without making a show of it. The other went to the security desk, showed credentials, and spoke so softly the guard leaned forward to hear him. Ava watched their hands. Empty, visible, controlled. The taller one turned from the desk and looked directly at her. Not at the bloody scrubs. Not at Nora. At Ava. He walked over with the careful respect of a man approaching someone who might be more dangerous than she looked. Ms. Carson. Ava said, Depends who's asking. Commander Blake Arlen. Rear Admiral Marcus Hale is requesting to speak with you. Nora's eyes flicked to Ava. Ava did not move. Rear Admiral Hale flew here for a patient update. Arlen's face did not change. He flew here to speak with you. The lobby felt suddenly smaller. Ava could feel Nora looking at her, could feel the receptionist pretending not to listen, could feel the security guard regretting every decision that had led him to this shift. At midnight, Ava said, Yes, ma'am, on the roof. Yes, ma'am. And if I say no, Arlen answered without pride, without pressure. Then I tell him you said no. That was not the answer she expected. She studied him for another second. What is Ethan Rourke to him? Arlen hesitated just briefly. Family. Ava closed her eyes once. Not long enough to be weakness, just long enough to rearrange the room in her mind. Nora touched her arm. Ava, you do not have to go anywhere with them. Ava looked down at Nora's hand, then back at her face. I know. That was why she went. The service elevator to the roof smelled like disinfectant and wet rubber. Arlen stood on one side of the door, Ava on the other. Neither filled the silence. The elevator climbed slowly, floor numbers blinking in cold white light. 2, 3, 4. Ava watched the reflection in the metal doors. Arlen watched the corners. You armed? She asked. No, ma'am. Your partner? Yes. Is he good? Arlen glanced at her reflection. Yes. That wasn't what I asked. A small pause. He's disciplined. Ava nodded. Better answer. The elevator doors opened to a concrete vestibule and a heavy rooftop door. Wind pressed against it from the other side. Arlen keyed in a code, then pushed it open with his shoulder. Rain came in sideways. The rooftop helipad spread out under harsh white lights. The helicopter sat with rotors still turning slow, its black body slick with rain. 2 more agents stood near the aircraft. One watched the stairwell access. One watched the sky, which told Ava more than any badge could have. Rear Admiral Marcus Hale stood near the edge of the pad. He wore a dark coat over civilian clothes, but there was no disguising command. It lived in the set of his shoulders, in the stillness of his hands, in the way the men around him gave him room without being told. He looked at Ava for several seconds. She looked back. The rain darkened his silver hair and ran down the lines beside his mouth. His face was weathered, not softened, the face of a man who had spent decades receiving bad news and deciding who still had to move. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that Ava had to listen carefully under the rotor noise. Lance Corporal Ethan Rourke is my nephew. Ava nodded once. He's alive. I know. He needs a surgeon blood and someone watching for tamponade recurrence, not a rooftop conversation. Hale's eyes narrowed slightly, but not in anger. You always talk to admirals like that. Only when they're standing between me and patient care. A trace of something almost like approval moved across his face. The report says you saved him. The report was written fast. I made calls. Ava's mouth tightened. What kind of calls? The kind that told me a nurse at a regional hospital in Virginia used battlefield technique with no hesitation under pressure after 3 physicians failed to act. Ava did not blink. That sounds like gossip. It sounded like history. The rain struck the helipad between them. For the first time, Ava let her duffel slide from her shoulder to the wet concrete. Her hands remained loose at her sides. Hale noticed. Of course he noticed. He said, Chief Petty Officer Ava Carson, Navy Hospital Corpsman, attached to Special Operations Medical Support. 2 deployments in places that never appeared on public maps. Ava's voice lost all warmth. That file is sealed. It was. A cold line moved through her chest. Hale stepped closer, stopping 6 feet away. 48 hours ago, someone accessed it from an unauthorized terminal. Ava listened to the rain. Not because she needed time. Because the sound kept the old room from coming back. The windowless briefing room. The flag in the corner. The smell of burnt coffee and dust in her own hair. The lieutenant commander telling her that national security required silence. The doctor who would not meet her eyes while signing the discharge summary. She asked, who we don't know yet. That is not a comforting answer. It was not meant to be. Ava looked toward the hospital roof access door. Does this have to do with Ethan? Yes. Was the shooting random? No. The word was clean and final. Ava felt the night shift below them change shape in her mind. Trauma Bay 3. Dr. Keene ordering her back. Strickland arriving too quickly. The way the bullet fragment had sat near the pericardium placed like a message for anyone with enough experience to read it. Hale said Ethan was helping my office trace a procurement chain tied to civilian medical infrastructure. Medical infrastructure, Ava repeated. Hospitals, data systems, environmental controls, emergency response logistics. She said nothing. Hale watched her carefully. You recognize the pattern. I recognize a lot of patterns. Most of them are bad. This one has a name. Ava already knew before he said it. She knew by the way his mouth tightened, by the way Arlen behind her stopped shifting his weight, by the way the rain suddenly seemed louder than the helicopter. Hale said, Nightglass. The name moved through her like a blade pulled from an old wound. She had not heard it spoken aloud in 3 years. Project Nightglass had started as a promise. That was how the worst things often started. A battlefield medical support program designed to protect wounded service members in hostile environments. Mobile trauma routing, chemical exposure response, remote triage, secure data transfer between forward teams and hospital ships. Fast decisions when seconds mattered. Then someone discovered that a system built to save lives could also be used to control them. Change a route, and a wounded man reached care too late. Alter a triage priority, and a name vanished under a number. Compromise environmental controls, and a treatment tent became a chamber. Ava had seen what happened when medicine became strategy in the hands of people who spoke of casualties as pressure points. She had also seen what happened to the people who tried to say no. "Nightglass is dead," she said. Hale's face did not move. It was buried. "That is not the same thing." "No." Ava turned away from him and looked out over Millstone. The town lay dark beyond the hospital wet streets, shining under traffic lights, houses tucked behind trees. Ordinary people asleep in ordinary rooms. A woman somewhere was probably packing a school lunch for a child. A man was probably letting his dog out under a porch light. Someone was probably lying awake worrying about a bill, a test result, a phone call they had not returned. They had no idea that a name like Nightglass could exist near them. That was the cruelty of it. The dangerous things rarely looked dangerous until after the damage was done. Hale said Ethan found evidence that parts of the program were being rebuilt through private contractors. Ava kept her eyes on the town. "Why bring this to me?" "Because your file was accessed before he was shot." She turned back. Hale held her gaze. "And because Ethan's first report mentioned Hawthorne Ridge." The rooftop seemed to tilt under her feet. Below them, the hospital lights glowed steady and clean. ICU rooms, recovery bays, pediatric beds, supply closets, nurses charting vitals, patients breathing through plastic tubing, a whole building full of people trusting walls, pipes, vents, records, locks, badges, and strangers. Ava whispered, "Who else knows I'm here?" "That is what I need to find out. You should start with whoever signed the vendor contracts." "We are. You should pull access logs from the last 6 weeks." "We are. You should isolate environmental controls from the hospital network." Hale's expression sharpened. "You know the building that well. I know every building I work in." Why Ava picked up her duffel. "Because I like leaving alive." Neither of them spoke for a moment. The rotor noise dropped lower. Rain ran along the painted circle of the helipad and disappeared into the drains. Somewhere below, a siren rose and faded on the road outside the hospital. Hale said federal investigator Lauren Voss is 4 minutes out. She will take jurisdiction inside the building. "Good. She will have questions for you." "I was fired." "That may not matter much by morning." Ava looked at him. "Admiral." "I don't care about my badge right now. I believe that." "Then understand this. If Nightglass is inside that hospital, Ethan is not the only target." Hale's eyes hardened. "No," he said. "He is not." The rooftop door opened behind them. Commander Arlen stepped out into the rain phone in hand, face controlled but changed. "Sir." Hale turned. Arlen looked once at Ava, then back at the Admiral. "Security just reported 3 patients in the East Wing went into sudden respiratory distress. Separate rooms, same symptoms." Ava was already moving before he finished. Hale called after her Carson. She stopped at the rooftop door and looked back. The rain ran down her face like sweat. For 1 second, she was not the fired nurse, not the quiet woman from the ER, not the ghost of a classified file. She was the person the night had been waiting for. "What symptoms?" she asked. Arlen read from the phone. Confusion, muscle twitching, labored breathing, 1 seizure. Ava opened the door. "Get me atropine oxygen and every nurse who still remembers how to listen." The word atropine changed the air around them. Commander Arlen moved first, already speaking into his phone as Ava pushed through the rooftop door and took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. Hale stayed behind her by half a landing, close enough to hear her breathing, far enough not to slow her down. The stairwell smelled of old paint, rainwater, and disinfectant. Ava moved fast, one hand grazing the rail, her mind already building the case from symptoms. Confusion, muscle twitching, labored breathing. 1 seizure. It was not panic. It was a pattern. By the time she hit the 4th floor landing, the hospital intercom crackled with a burst of static. Then a man's voice filled the stairwell. "Good evening, Hawthorne Ridge." Ava stopped so suddenly Hale almost collided with her. The voice was calm, clean, almost kind. "This facility is now operating under modified environmental conditions. Staff are advised to keep patients inside assigned rooms. Visitors should remain where they are. Emergency exits will not improve your situation." The stairwell seemed to hold its breath. Hale's hand went to his phone. The voice continued. "For those who remember Project Nightglass, consider this a correction long overdue. For those who do not, your education has begun." Static snapped once, then silence. Ava stood still for exactly 2 seconds. Hale watched her face. "That was him?" he asked. "No," Ava said. "That was someone who wanted us to think it was him. Ward." She looked down the next flight of stairs. "If Elias Ward is alive and inside this, he does not waste breath on theater unless the theater serves a purpose." Then what purpose? Ava started moving again. To make every scared person in this hospital look at the exits instead of the vents. They reached the 3rd floor and pushed into a corridor already tipping toward controlled chaos. Nurses moved quickly but not blindly. That mattered. Panic had not taken the floor yet. Fear had. Fear could still be used. Panic used people. A young nurse at the desk was trying to answer 2 phones while a visitor in sweatpants demanded to know why the doors had locked. Down the hall, a patient monitor alarmed behind a closed curtain. A respiratory therapist jogged out of supply with a stack of masks under one arm. Ava pointed at him. "You. East Wing rooms with symptoms." The therapist blinked, then recognized her. "Ava." "I thought Strickland fired you." "He did." "Walk faster." "He did." Nora Maddox was already outside room 318, hair coming loose from its clip gloves on voice, steady as stone. "Patient is altered oxygen sat 86 and climbing with mask pulse 124, pupils tight." Ava stepped inside. The patient was a woman in her late 60s, recovering from gallbladder surgery. Her eyes rolled toward Ava but did not focus. Sweat shone on her upper lip. Her fingers flexed against the sheet in small, repeated spasms. Ava checked the skin, the pupils, the breathing. Then she looked at the IV pole. "What meds?" Nora answered without checking the chart. "Post-op antibiotics, fluids, low-dose pain control. Nothing that explains this. Salivation minimal. Vomiting. No." Ava nodded. "Early exposure, low concentration." The younger nurse standing near the door swallowed hard. Exposure to what? Ava kept her tone even. Something that wants her nervous system to forget how to behave. The nurse went pale. Ava looked at her directly. "Listen to me. Fear is fine. Standing still is not. Get atropine from the crash cart. 2 milligrams ready. Do not push until I say." The nurse moved. Hale stood just outside the room taking in every word. Nora leaned close as Ava checked the patient's airway. "You know what this is?" "I know enough." That announcement said Nightglass. "Yes." Nora's eyes narrowed. "The thing you would not talk about." Ava adjusted the mask seal. "The thing I was hoping would stay buried." The patient's hand jerked. Her monitor jumped. Ava placed 2 fingers against the woman's wrist and felt the rhythm under the skin, fast but present. The young nurse returned with atropine. Ava took the syringe but held it for a breath. "Not yet. Oxygen first. Respiratory, I want a seal and a second line ready. Nora, call down to pharmacy and tell them to prepare additional atropine and pralidoxim if stocked." Nora did not ask why. That was why Ava trusted her. A man shouted in the hall. A visitor had seen federal agents near the elevators and was demanding to leave. Hale stepped out and spoke one sentence in a voice that did not rise. The shouting stopped. Ava did not look back. The patient's fingers began to slow. Oxygen saturation climbed to 91. Ava handed the syringe back. Hold. Keep monitoring. Nora stared at her. You are not staying. There are 3 symptomatic patients. This is the smallest part of the problem. Nora's face hardened. Then go. Ava moved to the next room. The second patient was younger, a man with pneumonia already fragile before the exposure. He was coughing hard enough to shake the bed rails. His daughter stood against the wall with both hands over her mouth, eyes wide and wet. Is he dying? She asked. Ava pulled on fresh gloves. Not if we stay useful. The daughter stared at her, shocked by the answer, then nodded like she had been given a job. Ava checked the airway, listened to the breath sounds, watched the twitching in the jaw. Same pattern, slightly worse. She ordered atropine oxygen suction on standby. She spoke low, clean, never fast enough to sound afraid. The daughter whispered, How are you so calm? Ava adjusted the mask. I am not calm. I am working. By the time she reached the third patient, Special Agent Lauren Voss had arrived on the floor. Ava recognized her before anyone introduced them. Voss wore a dark coat over a plain blouse, haircut short eyes that missed very little. She had the compact stillness of someone who had learned years ago that urgency did not require wasted motion. 2 federal agents followed behind her, both alert, both trying to understand a building that did not yet belong to them. Voss looked at Hale. Admiral, Agent Voss. Then her eyes moved to Ava. You are Carson. Ava tightened the strap on her glove. You are late. One of the agents stiffened. Voss did not. I was told you were fired. I was. And still treating patients. Patients keep ignoring administrative decisions. For the first time, something almost like a smile touched Voss's mouth. It vanished immediately. What do we have? 3 patients with signs consistent with low concentration cholinergic exposure. East wing only. Airborne delivery likely through ventilation. If that announcement was timed with symptom onset, the system was tested minutes before the broadcast. Voss listened without interrupting. Can the air system be isolated? It should be. Whether it can be from the hospital's control interface depends on how deep they are in the network. Who is they? Ava looked past Voss toward the ceiling vent. Someone with access planning time and a reason to say night glass out loud. Voss turned to one of her agents. Lock down the East Wing without ceiling medical staff out. I want hospital security off primary decisions and federal control on elevators, stairwells, roof access, ambulance bay. The agent moved. Ava said, Do not force all traffic into the main corridor. Voss looked back. Why? Because if this is a ventilation attack, crowding people into one airflow path helps whoever designed it. Voss held her gaze for 1 clean second. Then she turned to the agent. You heard her. Stagger movement. No crowding. The third patient was seizing. Ava entered the room and the world narrowed to the body on the bed. The monitor, the IV line, the nurse holding suction, the doctor calling for medication with too much volume in his voice and not enough control in his hands. Dr. Simon Keene stood near the foot of the bed. His face tightened when Ava came in. You should not be here. Ava looked at the patient, not at him. Then file a complaint. Keene moved into her path. You are no longer employed by this hospital. The patient convulsed again. The bed rails rattled. Ava's eyes cut to Keene at last. There is a man seizing behind you. I have it managed. No, Ava said. You have it witnessed. The nurse at the bedside looked between them, terrified. Keene's jaw worked once. He stepped aside because everyone in the room was watching, and even he understood the danger of being seen as the obstacle. Ava assessed quickly. The patient was elderly cardiac history vulnerable. This dose had hit harder, or his body had less room to absorb it. She ordered atropine. She ordered benzodiazepine per seizure protocol. She checked the mask seal and told the nurse exactly when to push. The seizure slowed, then stopped. The room exhaled. Keene stared at Ava with something too sharp to be simple anger. She noticed. She filed it away. Voss appeared in the doorway. Carson. Ava removed her gloves. What? We pulled the first internal alert. Security flagged unusual database queries 6 weeks ago. The review was tabled by Strickland's office. That tracks. There is more. Your personnel file was copied from a restricted archive 2 days ago. Ava stepped into the hallway. From inside the hospital, routed through a vendor credential. Ava looked down the corridor toward the maintenance doors. The building is not just being attacked, it has been prepared. Hale had joined them now, phone pressed to his ear, speaking to someone in short, controlled phrases. He ended the call and looked at Ava. Naval Cyber confirms a procurement shell tied to environmental systems maintenance here. Same pattern as 2 other regional hospitals. Voss's eyes darkened. Name's Hawthorne Ridge is the only active incident. Ava said, "Then it is the demonstration site." The words settled among them, not loudly, heavily. From the nurse's station, a printer began spitting paper. A phone rang and rang until someone grabbed it. Down the hall, Nora's voice cut through rising noise with the kind of authority that kept people from breaking apart. Voss stepped closer to Ava. "Tell me what night glass was." Ava glanced at Hale. He said nothing. That was permission or something close to it. Ava chose her words carefully. Project Nightglass started as a battlefield medical integration program. It was supposed to keep wounded service members alive from point of injury to definitive care. Triage, data exposure, response evacuation routing, environmental monitoring, hospital handoff. Voss listened. And then people with cleaner hands than ours realized medical systems make excellent control points. If you can influence who gets routed, who gets delayed, which facility receives, which patient, which air system shuts off, which drug cabinet unlocks, you can shape outcomes without firing a shot. Voss's voice lowered. Who built it? Ava looked toward a vent cover rattling softly overhead. Dr. Elias Ward was one of the architects, civilian contractor. Brilliant, polite, the kind of man who could describe a death toll as a systems efficiency failure. Hale said Ward disappeared before the shutdown. Ward does not disappear, Ava said. He relocates. Voss studied her. You knew him. I knew his work. That is not the same thing. No, Ava said. It is worse. A shout came from the far end of the hall. Not fear. Discovery. Ava turned before the others did. A maintenance door near radiology was standing open. It should not have been. Ava began walking toward it. Voss followed. Carson. Ava did not slow. That door requires a badge and a maintenance key after 11 p.m. You know that how I know the doors. Hale caught up to her. Wait for my people. Ava stopped 10 feet from the open door. The hallway lights reflected faintly off the metal handle. Inside was darkness cut by the blue glow of a monitor. She heard movement. One person. Careful. Not hospital careful. She looked at Hale. One person inside. Maybe two deeper. He is not expecting a group. If your agents stack loud, he wipes the screen or trips whatever he came to trip. Voss's hand moved slightly, signaling her agents to hold. Ava stepped to the wall beside the frame. Her breathing changed again. Hale saw it. Voss saw it too. The fired nurse was gone. In her place stood someone neither of them had fully met. Ava pushed the door open and entered low. The room beyond was not a closet. It was a server alcove, narrow and cold, lined with rack-mounted equipment that hummed under its own conditioned air. Cables ran along the ceiling in bundled lines. 2 workstations sat against the far wall, One was active. A young man in Hawthorne Ridge maintenance coveralls stood in front of the monitor with a network cable in one hand. For half a second, his face went blank with surprise. Then he reached toward his hip. Ava crossed the space in 3 strides. She caught his wrist, rotated it sharply, and drove him chest first into the workstation before his fingers closed around whatever he carried. The monitor rocked. The man gasped. Ava leaned close to his ear. "Do not make me guess twice." His hand opened. A compact tool clattered to the floor. Not a gun, a signal injector. Voss entered behind her, weapon drawn but angled down. Hale followed, eyes going straight to the screen. Ava kept the man pinned. "Name." The man said nothing. She increased pressure until his breath changed. "Name." "Parker." "Badge says maintenance." "I am maintenance?" "No," Ava said. "You are dressed as maintenance." Voss stepped to the workstation. On the screen was a live topology map of the hospital's environmental control network. East wing ventilation nodes glowed amber. 3 remote access points pulsed red. A 4th node blinked green near the sub-basement mechanical plant. In the lower corner, a plain text countdown ticked down. 43:12, 43:11, 43:10. Hale's voice was very quiet. "That looks like a timer." Ava looked at the map and felt old knowledge uncoil inside her. "No, that is not a timer." Voss glanced at her. "What is it?" "A deadline." The man under her hands went still. Ava felt it through his wrist. She looked at the highlighted nodes again. The timestamps were recent, but not immediate. 36 hours, 29 hours, 11 hours. The test dose had not started the attack. It had confirmed the delivery path. She released one hand long enough to point. 3 access points were modified before tonight. This 4th one is clean because they still need the local trigger. The patients upstairs were a test concentration, enough to scare us, enough to make us treat the wrong event as the main event. Voss turned to the man. "Where is the local trigger?" He stared at the floor. Ava stepped closer, her voice lower now, almost gentle. "There are 3 people upstairs with poison in their lungs. One is old enough to be your grandmother. You do not have the luxury of silence." His jaw tightened. Voss said, "We can do this formally." Ava kept her eyes on him. "We do not have formal minutes." The countdown continued. 42:36, 42:35. The man swallowed. "I do not know the full sequence." Ava heard the shape of the lie. "But you know where it is?" No answer. She leaned in. "Sub-basement." His eyes flicked once. "Enough." Ava turned toward Hale. "East mechanical plant." Hale was already calling it in. Voss grabbed the man by the collar and turned him toward her agents. "Secure him. Keep him alive. I want every credential, every device, every word he says recorded." The agents took him. As they pulled him toward the door, he looked back at Ava. "You cannot shut it down from there unless you know the sequence." Ava stopped. The man's face had gone pale, but his voice held a strange kind of certainty. "If you interrupt it wrong, the system accelerates." Voss stepped closer. "How much?" He looked at the timer. "Cuts the window in half." For 1 beat, only the machines hummed. Ava looked back at the screen. The topology map, the access points, the clean node, the countdown. She could almost see the building breathing around them. Vents above sleeping patients, ducts behind walls, fans and dampers and chemical tanks hidden inside ordinary infrastructure. A hospital was not one room. It was a body, and someone had found its lungs. Ava grabbed the maintenance badge from the workstation and moved for the door. Hale called after her. "Carson, wait." She stopped in the hallway, already facing the stairwell. His eyes held hers. "Federal teams are moving. They do not know this building. Voss can send agents with you. They do not know night glass. Voss came out of the alcove behind him. And you do. Ava looked down the corridor toward the stairwell door. The east wing lights flickered once. Somewhere above them, a patient began coughing again. Ava's voice was steady. I know what it feels like when it wakes up. Then she ran for the sub-basement. Ava hit the stairwell door with her shoulder and took the first flight down 2 steps at a time. Behind her, the hospital kept changing. It was not loud enough to be a riot, not yet. That was the dangerous part. Panic did not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it entered through small cracks. A patient asking why the doors were locked. A mother clutching her child too tightly. A nurse answering the same question 6 different ways while waiting for orders from people who had never stood beside a crashing body at midnight. Ava heard all of it as she descended. Footsteps above, radios crackling, a distant cough from the east wing, the overhead announcement still ringing in her head. For those who remember Project Nightglass, consider this a correction long overdue. She pushed through the second-floor landing, then the first, then down again into the service level where the hospital changed its skin. The polished floors disappeared. The bright signs vanished. Down here, Hawthorne Ridge was not a healing place. It was concrete pipe cable, heat coolant, old water, and locked gray doors with labels nobody read unless something had already gone wrong. Ava slowed at the bottom. Not from fear. To listen. The sub-basement had its own language. The low pulse of pumps, the deep throat of ventilation fans, the distant vibration of compressors behind walls. Somewhere water moved through a large main with a steady metallic hum. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead one after another, then steadied in patches. Ava held the stolen maintenance badge in one hand and moved east. She had studied this level during her 3rd week at Hawthorne Ridge. Nobody had told her to. Nobody had known. During orientation, they had given her a staff badge, a packet on patient privacy, and a map so simplified it looked like it had been drawn by someone afraid of truth. The public map showed elevators, wards, cafeteria, chapel, pharmacy, radiology. The real building lived beneath that. Air handlers, water valves, medical gas lines, generator feeds, data closets disguised as storage rooms, service tunnels that made no sense unless you knew which expansion had been added in which decade and which contractors had been too cheap to remove old infrastructure. Ava had learned it the same way she learned every place she worked. Where are the exits? Where are the blind corners? What systems keep people alive? What systems can kill them if someone turns the wrong thing? She reached a fire door marked East Mechanical Plant. The badge reader glowed green before she touched it. That was wrong. The door was already unlocked. Ava took one breath. Slow in, slower out. Then she opened it. Sound hit first. The mechanical plant roared like the inside of a ship. Massive ventilation units lined the far wall, their housings trembling under load. Silver ductwork ran overhead in thick arteries. Pressure gauges shivered. Control panels blinked in rows of amber, green, and red. Condensation ran down insulated lines and collected in a drain channel across the floor. Ava stepped inside and let the door close softly behind her. 30 yards away, a man stood at the main environmental control panel. He was not young like the technician in the server alcove, mid-40s maybe? Tall, lean, close-cropped hair with gray at the temples. Hawthorne Ridge coveralls, but the fabric sat wrong on him, too new, too clean at the seams. His hands moved across the panel with patience, not rushed. That made him worse. Ava moved behind the nearest pump housing and watched. The man spoke without turning. You made better time than the screen predicted. Ava stayed where she was. People keep saying that tonight. He looked over his shoulder. His face was narrow, tired, and controlled. Not the face of a zealot. Not the face of a man enjoying himself. That complicated things. You are Ava Carson. You are not Parker. No? Then why did Parker have your badge route? The man's mouth tightened. Because Parker steals what he cannot earn. Ava stepped from behind the pump housing, keeping distance and line of sight. Name: Caleb Sutter. The name landed somewhere in her memory. Procurement chains, contractor reports Hale had mentioned, environmental systems maintenance. You work for Ward. I worked near him. That is a careful answer. It is the only honest one. Ava's eyes moved from his face to the panel. 4 active screens. One showed airflow zones. One showed intake pressure. One showed chemical isolation status, though the label had been buried under a maintenance diagnostic window. The 4th showed the same countdown from upstairs. 3844, 3843, 3842. Caleb noticed her looking. The test dose was low concentration, east wing only. Nobody has to die from that if your people treated it quickly. My people did. Then they will live. Ava took one step closer. That is supposed to make me feel better. No. Good. He turned fully now, hands visible. I can shut it down. You were standing at the panel when I walked in. Yes. Forgive me if that does not feel comforting. Caleb gave a short, humorless breath. It should not. Ava could hear footsteps outside the mechanical room now, heavy controlled getting closer. Hale or Voss, maybe both. She kept her attention on Caleb. Step away from the panel. I step away, the local process keeps running. Then explain it from there. He looked at the timer. You do not have time to distrust me properly. Ava's voice stayed level. I can distrust you very efficiently. For the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not a smile. Almost respect. The ventilation system has 3 interlocked stages. Delivery line, dispersal valve, purge lock. The network trigger came through the hospital system, but Ward never trusts remote access completely. There is a local failsafe. Physical sequence. If you interrupt the wrong stage first, the system assumes compromise and accelerates release. How much? 18 minutes. The fire door opened behind Ava. Hale entered with 2 armed agents. Voss followed a second later, eyes taking in the room the distance the panel Caleb's hands. Hands where I can see them, one agent ordered. Caleb raised them slowly. Ava did not look away from him. He says he can shut it down. Voss came to stand beside Ava. You believe him? No. Caleb said, That is fair. Voss's face remained unreadable. Then why should we use you? Caleb looked at her, then at Hale. Because Elias Ward built this system, and I am the one who installed the pieces he could not put on an invoice. One of the agents shifted his grip. Hale's voice cut through the machine noise. You are admitting involvement in a chemical attack on a civilian hospital. Caleb looked at the Admiral. I am admitting I helped build the door. I did not know what he planned to push through it until 3 weeks ago. Ava stepped closer. And in those 3 weeks, you did what his eyes moved to hers. I copied records, buyer lists, payment routes, site diagrams, names of contractors inside 3 other hospitals, enough to burn his network. Yet here you are, because if I ran, he would use the system without me. If I stayed, I had a chance to stop it. Voss said, Convenient. Yes. You expect a deal? Numb. Caleb's voice roughened for the first time. I expect prison. I expect every court in this country to decide how much of a monster I am. But I want the record to say I cooperated before the release, not after. Not when bodies were already covered. Ava watched his hands. They did not shake. That could mean courage. It could mean training. It could mean he had accepted the worst of himself and no longer needed denial. The timer moved, 37:16. 37:15. Ava said, Walk me through it. Hale looked at her. Ava. She kept her eyes on Caleb. If he lies, I will know fast enough. Voss studied her, then nodded once to her agents. Cover him. If his hands move anywhere she does not approve, put him on the floor. Caleb turned back to the panel slowly. Ava moved with him close enough to stop his hands far enough to see the entire display. First stage, Caleb said. Delivery line isolation. Left screen, third column. You see the amber valve position, I see it. It has to go manual before purge. If purge goes first, pressure backs into the dispersal line and accelerates. Yes. Show me the control. He pointed but did not touch. Ava read the label, then the routing diagram beneath it. Her memory supplied a different room years earlier. Dust in the air. A field unit control board flickering on generator power while someone shouted that the wind had shifted. She pushed the memory away and stayed in the present. Do it, she said. Caleb tapped the control and entered a code. The amber valve shifted to blue. Ava watched the pressure number climb, then settle. Second stage, chemical isolation tank. It is mislabeled as coolant overflow. Ward's people tied the test compound into the line through a maintenance bypass. Voss swore softly. Hale said, Inside a hospital. Caleb did not turn. That was the point. Ava glanced at him. To prove civilian medical systems can be turned. To prove they can be owned, Caleb said. That answer chilled the room more than the machinery. He brought up the isolation tank window. Ava made him explain the path twice. Intake, bypass, holding tank, sealed purge. She checked each step against the map on the second screen. Then she nodded. Caleb initiated purge. Somewhere above and behind the wall, a heavy valve opened with a deep metal thud. The ventilation units groaned. A red warning flashed once. Ava's right hand snapped toward Caleb's wrist. He froze. What is that pressure imbalance? Expected for 3 seconds. 1. The warning stayed red. 2. Caleb's jaw tightened. 3. The warning turned amber, then green. Ava released his wrist. Do not ask me to trust the word expected again. I will not. The agents exchanged a look. Hale did not. His eyes stayed on Ava, measuring not just what she did, but what it cost her not to do more. The timer continued. 33:02. 33:01. Caleb reached toward his chest pocket. 3 weapons rose. He stopped. Physical key, he said. Ava held out her hand. He slowly removed a flat metal key sealed in a plastic sleeve and gave it to her. She inspected it, then the lock housing at the lower right of the panel. What happens when this turns third stage? Local release valve locks closed. After that, the compound remains in the holding tanks. Hazmat can remove it. What happens if you lied? He looked at her. Then everyone upstairs has 18 minutes. Ava placed the key in the lock but did not turn it. Why did Ward choose tonight? Caleb swallowed. Because of Rourke. Hale's face hardened. Caleb continued. Ethan Rourke found the procurement chain. Ward had him shot to close the leak, but he also knew your file had surfaced in the same search. When he realized you worked here, he changed the timeline. Ava's fingers tightened around the key. He wanted me involved. He wanted to know if Nightglass had left anything useful in you. The machine noise filled the silence. Voss said, Turn the key. Carson. Ava turned it. The lock resisted for half a second, then gave. The panel shifted. One amber light became green. Then another. Then the airflow diagram reset across the east wing. A line of text appeared. Local release disabled. The timer vanished. Nobody cheered. Relief in places like that did not arrive as celebration. It arrived as breath held too long, finally leaving the body. Hale spoke into his phone. Ventilation threat contained. Hazmat to sub-basement east mechanical plant. Holding tanks active. Medical teams continue treatment protocol. Voss looked at Caleb. Where are the records? Caleb nodded toward his coverall pocket. Encrypted drive. Left leg pocket. Passphrase is not written down. One agent removed the drive while another secured Caleb's wrists. Caleb did not resist. Ava watched the panel for 3 more seconds, verifying every indicator her eyes could understand. Then she asked, "Where is Ward Caleb's expression changed? Small, fast. Fear, but not for himself." "I do not know." Ava stepped closer. "You were doing so well." "I do not know where he is." "I know what he said." "What did he say?" Caleb looked toward the ceiling as if he could see the floors above. "He said air was never the best way to prove control, only the loudest." Voss's phone buzzed. She answered, listened for 3 seconds, and her face went still. Ava saw it. What Voss lowered the phone. Nora Maddox was found unconscious near the East Wing nurses' station. Ava did not move. The room seemed to pull away from her. Voss continued, voice controlled. "She is alive, being treated now. Concussion. Possible chemical contact on her sleeve, but not the same delivery route." Ava's jaw set. Was there a message? Voss looked at her. "Yes." Hale stepped closer. What message? Voss read from her phone. "You stopped the breath. Now stop the blood." The machines kept roaring. Ava heard them differently now. Not as lungs, as arteries, water lines, IV prep sinks, sterile rinse, dialysis feeds, ICU. She turned toward the door. Voss said, "Carson, Ward is still inside. We are locking down every exit. He does not need an exit yet." Hale followed her. "What does the message mean?" Ava moved through the fire door into the sub-basement corridor. "It means the first system was meant to pull us down here." Voss caught up. And the second, Ava looked toward the ceiling, toward all the patients stacked above them in lit rooms and dark ones breathing, sleeping, waiting. The second is already moving through the part of the hospital nobody thinks to fear. They reached the stairwell at the same time. An agent's voice broke over Voss's radio. "Agent Voss, we have a problem. Strickland is gone." 2 agents down outside the conference room. Both alive. No visual on the director. Ava stopped with one hand on the stairwell door. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Hale said Ward took him. Ava opened the door. No. Ward borrowed what Strickland gave him. She started up the stairs faster than before, every system of the hospital redrawing itself in her mind. Ava climbed out of the sub-basement with the hospital unfolding above her like a wounded body. Every floor had a system. Every system had a weakness. Air, water, power, data, medication, access. The people who designed hospitals believed in redundancy because lives depended on it. Elias Ward believed in redundancy because failure was useful only when it had a backup. The stairwell door opened onto the first-floor service corridor. Ava did not run into the main hall at once. She stopped inside the shadow of the door and listened. The corridor beyond was narrow, painted a tired beige lit by ceiling panels that hummed with a faint electrical buzz. A cart full of clean linens sat against the wall. Someone had abandoned a paper cup of coffee on a ledge. The smell of rain had followed her down from the roof and mixed with bleach-warm plastic and the sour metallic undertone of hospital fear. Hale came through behind her phone to his ear, breathing hard but controlled. Voss followed, one hand on her radio. Ava raised 2 fingers without looking at them. Both stopped. At the far end of the corridor, voices moved fast. Federal agents, hospital security, someone asking for a medic, someone else saying the west elevators were frozen on manual hold. The building was being locked down from the outside in. Ward would know that. He would not move toward the obvious exits. He would not move toward the lobby ambulance bay or roof. Those routes were for people who believed escape meant leaving through a door. Ava pictured the map beneath the public map. The East Wing had been added 6 years earlier, a donor-funded expansion, new recovery rooms, modern ICU suite, renovated radiology corridor, clean walls, glass dividers, better lighting. But the expansion had not replaced the old utility infrastructure. It had tied into it. Water was the quiet system. Nobody feared water in a hospital until it carried something it should not. Ava looked at Voss. Where was Strickland taken from second-floor administrative corridor, outside the conference room? Direction of travel. Voss listened to her radio, then answered. Security feed lost for 90 seconds. Last confirmed movement toward the East Service Passage. Hale looked at Ava. Ward took him toward the same wing. Ava nodded. Strickland signed the contracts. He knows the access points even if he does not understand what he gave away. Voss's eyes narrowed. You think Ward needs him alive? For a minute or two? That is all. Ava turned toward the service junction. Ward does not collect hostages. He uses tools. The words left a cold silence behind them. They moved through the first-floor service passage, not the public corridor. Hale's agents fell in behind them, disciplined and quiet. Voss spoke into her radio as she walked, ordering teams to seal the radiology side access, the east stairwell, and the ICU service elevator without interrupting patient care. Patient care. The phrase stayed in Ava's mind. Above them, people were lying in beds with tubes in their arms and incisions under bandages. Some were sleeping because pain medication had finally pulled them under. Some were awake and staring at ceiling tiles, waiting for a nurse to tell them the strange announcement did not matter. Some were too weak to be afraid. Those were the patients Ward would choose. Ava knew men like him, men who talked about systems until they forgot the systems were made of breathing people. At the junction behind radiology, Ava stopped. 3 paths opened ahead. Left led back toward administration. Right led to imaging and the public hall. Straight ahead narrowed into the East Service Corridor, where the newer wing connected to the old mechanical spine. Hale looked right then straight, which way Ava closed her eyes for 1 second. Not to remember the map, to feel the building. The ventilation attack had pulled them down. The note on Nora had pointed them sideways. Ward had taken Strickland to force movement, but not toward a place where Strickland mattered as a person, toward a place where his badge, his face, or his access could still open something. The secondary mechanical room, Ava said. Voss said, "We have teams checking it. They will find Strickland." Hale turned toward her. And Ward. Ava looked down the right corridor toward radiology. Ward will already be past it. They moved. The radiology wing at night felt like a closed museum of machines. Dark rooms behind thick doors, warning lights above imaging suites. A wheelchair parked in a corner. The polished floor reflected the emergency lights in faint red streaks. Ava moved quickly but not blindly. Her eyes touched every surface. Every open door, every cart, every shadow that did not belong. A soft burst of radio traffic came from Voss. Secondary mechanical room located. Director Strickland found restrained. Alive. Federal team entering now. Hale's jaw tightened. Status Voss listened. No visible serious injury. He is talking. Ava did not slow. He will say Ward left 2 minutes ago. Voss repeated that into the radio. A second later, her eyes shifted. They confirm. Strickland says Ward left 2 or 3 minutes ago. Hale looked at Ava with something between respect and concern. How did you know? Because Ward wanted us close enough to understand the second attack, but late enough to have to hurry. Voss said, "That sounds personal." It is not personal to him. Ava reached the end of the radiology hall and pushed through a staff-only door into a narrow utility passage. Motion lights flickered on one by one, pale and cold. To him, she said, it is design. The passage was barely wide enough for 2 people. Pipes ran overhead. Electrical conduit followed the wall at shoulder height. The air was warmer here, damp with the smell of old insulation and metal. Somewhere nearby, water moved in a large line with a steady low thrum. Ava stopped under the first light and looked down the passage. The next section was already lit. Someone had passed through seconds before. She raised her hand. Everyone behind her froze. From beyond the next turn came a voice. Male, low, speaking into a phone. Ava could not make out every word, but the cadence was wrong for panic. Calm, measured, irritated maybe, but not afraid. Ward. She felt Hale's presence behind her, then Voss's. No one spoke. Ava moved forward. The utility passage opened into a secondary access room that housed water pressure controls for the east wing. It was small, square, and poorly lit. A maintenance panel stood open on the far wall. A water main crossed the room at chest height, thick and insulated with an access port unlocked beneath a pressure gauge. A man stood at the port. He looked nothing like the monster most people would have built in their minds. No wild eyes, no dramatic scars, no military posture meant to impress. He was in his late 50s, average height, clean-shaven, wearing a dark visitor jacket over plain clothes. His hair was neatly combed. His face was forgettable in the way some faces became after years of practice. He held a phone in one hand and a small pressurized canister in the other. When Ava entered, he looked up. He did not flinch. "Ava Carson," he said. Her name sounded different in his mouth. Not familiar. Catalogued. She kept her eyes on the canister. "Put it down." Ward ended the call without looking at the screen and slid the phone into his pocket. "You were always difficult to route." Voss and Hale entered behind Ava, but the narrow opening forced them to stay back. One armed agent appeared at the passage mouth. Ward glanced at the weapon, then at the canister, then back to Ava. He had positioned himself well. Too close to the access port for comfort. Too far for a clean grab unless she committed fully. The canister was angled downward but not yet seated. He would need one deliberate movement to connect it. That was the margin. Ava's voice stayed flat. "What is in it?" Ward smiled faintly. "The same compound family as the ventilation test. Different concentration, different delivery profile. Names. You always did prefer useful information. Names. Modified organophosphate carrier. Stabilized enough for distribution through water under pressure. It breaks down faster than I would like, but the window is sufficient." Voss's voice came from behind Ava. "Dr. Elias Ward, step away from the canister." Ward did not look at her. Federal authority has such a comforting sound when it arrives late. Hale stepped slightly to Ava's right. "Your network is collapsing." Ward's eyes moved to him. "Admiral Hale, you look older than your clearance photo." Hale's voice hardened. "You shot my nephew. I authorized a correction to an information leak." Ava took one slow step left. Ward's eyes came back to her. "Careful." She stopped. The room held. Water hummed inside the pipe above the access port. The sound was steady, patient, indifferent. Ava looked at the canister again. "ICU and post-surgical recovery." Ward tilted his head. "Very good." Hale's hand tightened at his side. Voss said, "Those patients are defenseless." Ward finally looked at her. "All patients are defenseless, Agent Voss. That is why hospitals work as leverage." Ava watched his right wrist. Relaxed. Not loose. Prepared. "You built night glass to save wounded soldiers," she said. "No." The answer came too quickly. Ava heard the truth underneath it. Ward continued softer now. "Other people sold it that way. I built night glass because war does not end when the shooting stops. It moves into evacuation chains, triage centers, rehabilitation wards, supply networks, political optics. Everyone pretends medicine sits outside conflict." It never has. Ava shifted her weight just enough to ease pressure off her left side. Her ribs ached from the mechanical plant, though she had not noticed when it happened. Pain was information. She filed it away. Ward's eyes followed the movement. You were one of the few who understood the architecture. I understood what you did with it. You saw a fragment. I saw enough. His mouth curved without warmth. You saw what frightened you. Ava's voice lowered. I saw a treatment tent locked down with 11 wounded men inside while your environmental model ran. For the first time, Hale looked at her sharply. Ward did not. 6 survived, he said. The room seemed to shrink around that number. Ava felt the old heat rise in her hands. Not anger. Anger was too simple. This was a deeper thing made of names, faces, and the sound of a man begging for air through a mask that had stopped helping. Do not count them for me, she said. Ward studied her. There she is, Voss said Ava. Ava did not turn. Ward's attention sharpened, pleased by the fracture he thought he had made. You disappeared after Zaranj. Ava said nothing. 6 days missing. Then you came back with a jaw fracture, chemical burns, and a testimony nobody wanted written down. The Navy buried you badly. I always thought that was wasteful. Ava took another slow step left. Ward led her. You read my file, she said. I helped create the system that stored it. Then you know I am not your hostage. No, Ward said. You are my proof that even damaged assets retain function. Hale moved. Just half a step. Ward's canister hand shifted toward the port. Ava raised her palm slightly without taking her eyes off Ward. Hale stopped. Ward smiled. You see, she understands proximity better than rank. Voss's voice was low. Your contractor is in custody. Caleb Sutter gave us the drive. Ward's expression did not change, but Ava saw the micro pause after Caleb's name. There it was. A recalculation. Small, fast, real. Ava used it. She drifted 2 inches left, then another. Ward's focus turned inward for less than a second. He was seeing pathways collapse in his mind. Buyer routes, shell companies, site maps, contractor identities. The things men like him loved because they made violence feel clean. Caleb cooperated before release, Ava said. Ward's eyes hardened. Caleb has always mistaken guilt for judgment. He chose a side. He chose fear. He chose people breathing upstairs over your demonstration. Ward looked at the canister. The demonstration can change. Ava heard Hale's radio whisper behind her. Voss must have muted the volume with her hand because the words were only fragments. Team in position, east corridor sealed. Hazmat 2 minutes. 2 minutes did not matter. Ward needed one motion. Ava said, You have nothing left to sell. Ward met her eyes. You think markets require success? They do not. They require fear. A failed attack in a locked hospital with federal response, Navy involvement, public exposure, and 3 compromised sites under investigation still creates demand. You poison patients and call it demand. I demonstrate vulnerability. You kill the weak because the strong pay faster when they see beds fill. That struck him. Not morally. Strategically. He disliked being made crude. You were always sentimental, he said. I was medical. Medicine is sentiment disciplined by procedure. No, Ava said. Medicine is the reason procedure exists. For a moment, all the sound in the room seemed to gather around the water main. Hale took a breath behind her. Voss did not move. Ward's canister hand lowered a fraction. That was not surrender. It was preparation. Ava moved, not straight. Straight lines belonged to men with guns and people who had not learned better. She cut low to her left, came inside the angle of his right arm, and drove both hands into his wrist before he could seat the canister into the port. Ward reacted fast. Too fast for a man who looked ordinary. He twisted with her, using the canister as leverage, trying to slam her hands into the edge of the access panel. Ava ducked under his elbow and turned her shoulder into his ribs. They hit the wall together. Metal rang. Pain shot through her left side, hot and bright. She held the wrist. Ward drove his free hand into her shoulder and shoved hard. Her back hit a pipe bracket. Her vision sparked white at the edges. She changed the angle with the impact, using the wall instead of fighting it, stepping through and under, rotating his wrist outward. The joint began to fail. Ward's breath hissed. The canister shook between them. Ava leaned closer, teeth clenched. "Let go." He tried to bring his knee up. She shifted her hip and took the strike on her thigh. Pain bloomed. She turned his wrist another inch. The human body had limits. Even Elias Ward had to obey them. His grip opened. The canister dropped. Ava caught it with her left hand before it hit the floor, then shoved backward, creating space. She brought the canister tight against her chest for 1 second, then away from her body as she turned toward the passage. Voss. The word had barely left her mouth when another man stepped into the doorway behind the federal agent. Young. Dark jacket. Hospital visitor badge. The agent began to turn, but the man already had a compact weapon in his hand. He struck the agent at the base of the neck with something short and black. The agent dropped to one knee. Hale reached for the man. The narrow doorway betrayed him. The operative slipped inside the room weapon angled toward Ava. "Canister," he said. Ava looked at him, then at Ward. Ward was cradling his injured wrist. His expression had changed back to calm. The backup for the backup. Ava had counted the room correctly when she entered. She had counted the plan wrong. Voss's weapon was up, but the angle was bad. Hale stood partly between her and the operative. The agent on the floor was trying to move. Ward was behind Ava's right shoulder. The access port was still open. Ava held the canister. The operative held the gun. "Ward said Mr. Laird is less conversational than I am." The operative took 1 step forward. "Put it on the floor." Ava did not. She saw the room in pieces. Distance to operative, 6 feet. Distance to Ward, 4. Distance to open port, 3. Distance to passage, 2 behind the operative. The canister was the center of every outcome, so she threw it, not at the operative. Past him, hard. The canister flew through the doorway and into the narrow passage, clanging against the concrete floor and skidding into the dark beneath the motion lights. The operative turned by instinct. Only his head. Only half a second. Ava took it. She drove forward into his blind side forearm, across his throat shoulder, into his back. Full body weight behind the strike. His head hit the metal doorframe with a sound that made even Hale flinch. His knees buckled. Ava caught him before he blocked the doorway completely. Not for mercy, but because bodies in narrow spaces became obstacles. She guided him down against the wall, trapped his weapon wrist under her knee, and stripped the gun from his hand. Ward moved behind her. Ava pivoted, but her bruised side slowed her by a fraction. Ward was already there. He kicked the gun from her hand and slammed his injured forearm into her shoulder. The force knocked her into the passage. She caught the wall, stayed upright, and saw him grab the operative's fallen weapon from the floor. The canister sat 10 feet down the pipe chase, half hidden in the dark. Ward aimed at her. Enough. Voss was still in the room, weapon raised, but Ward used Ava as the line between them. Hale stood at an angle, jaw tight, hands open because a bad shot in a pipe chase could ricochet through flesh and steel. Ava backed into the passage, stopping between Ward and the canister. Ward stepped out after her. 7 feet separated them. His right hand shook slightly from the wrist injury, but the gun remained steady enough. Ava's left side burned when she breathed. The motion lights flickered above them, one panel bright, the next dim, the one beyond barely alive. The water main hummed over their heads like a pulse. Ward said, "Move away from the canister." Ava said, No, you are unarmed. Yes, you are injured. Yes, you are out of time. No. Something in his face tightened. Ava lowered her voice. You are. Ward studied her. The gun did not move. Ava continued. Caleb's drive is in federal hands. Your procurement chain is exposed. The environmental system is locked. The water port is blocked. Your second operative is down. Your buyers are not loyal to you. They are loyal to distance. By morning they will deny, cut, burn, and cooperate. Ward's breathing changed. Just slightly. They paid you for control, Ava said. All they can see now is noise. Ward's eyes flicked toward the canister. Ava saw it. He still believed he could leave with something. A sample, a threat, a bargaining chip. He was not done because men like Ward never understood endings unless they were imposed. You need a hostage and an exit, Ava said. Ward's mouth curved faintly. You offer yourself. I am telling you I am a terrible hostage. I know exactly what you are. No, she said. You know what a file told you. His finger settled closer to the trigger. A file can be accurate. A file can say I went missing for 6 days. It cannot tell you what I decided on the 7th. That moved through him. Not enough, but enough to hold him for one breath. At the far end of the pipe chase, a service door opened. Softly. Ward heard it. So did Ava. His eyes shifted past her shoulder. 1 second. Less. Ava moved inside the weapon line. Her left hand snapped to his wrist and drove the barrel upward. The gun fired once into the pipe above the sound exploding inside the narrow passage. Steam hissed from a struck line and hot mist burst into the air. Ava ignored it. She stepped into him and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. The body did what bodies do. Ward's breath vanished. His knees softened. His grip loosened. Ava took the gun, stepped back, and aimed it at his chest with both hands. Floor. Ward folded downward, one hand reaching for air that would not come. Federal agents rushed in from the far end of the passage, weapons up, voices sharp. Ava kept the gun pointed down and away as soon as they entered. Subject down. One weapon in my hand. Canister 10 feet behind me. I am not a threat. The cadence was clear. Practiced. Necessary. An agent took the gun from her. Another secured Ward. A third kicked the canister farther from the access room, then knelt beside it with a containment case. Voss emerged from the access room, face tight with controlled anger. Hale followed, one hand pressed to the shoulder of the injured agent, who was conscious and cursing under his breath. Ward was rolled onto his stomach and cuffed, his face pressed against the concrete. For the first time all night, he looked ordinary in a way that did not feel cultivated. Just a man on the floor, breathing hard, wrist-damaged, suit jacket, damp from steam. Ava leaned against the wall. Pain arrived all at once. Left ribs, shoulder, thigh, a sharp line across her palm where the canister seam had cut skin. Her ears rang from the gunshot. Voss stepped in front of her. Are you hit? Ava shook her head. Ribs, shoulder, nothing acute. You do not decide that. I just did. Voss stared at her for half a second, then looked at the agent with the containment case. The canister. The agent answered. Secure, no breach visible. Ava said, higher concentration, same compound family, intended for the east water main. ICU and post-surgical recovery were the exposure zones. Voss looked back at Ward. You heard her. Confirm medical countermeasures with hazmat and pharmacy. Keep ICU water isolated until cleared. No one uses East Wing water for patient care. Hale spoke into his phone voice like iron. Admiral Hale. Water threat contained. Primary suspect in custody. I want Keene located now. Simon Keene. ER physician. Detain him quietly if possible, loudly if necessary. Ava looked up. Voss heard the name too. Why keen Hale's eyes did not leave Ward. Because Ward was not alone inside the clinical staff. Ward laughed then. It was soft, painful, without humor. Ava stepped away from the wall, though her body argued against it. "What did you say?" Ward turned his head enough to look at her from the floor. "You always did hate incomplete charts." Voss crouched beside him. "Talk." Ward's smile was thin. Dr. Simon Keene accessed her file. Keene confirmed Rourke's arrival. Keene delayed the chest intervention. Keene told Strickland exactly which words would make the firing clean. Ava felt the statement pass through her without surprise at first. Then came the colder part, Trauma Bay 3. Keene ordering her to stand down. Keene standing too still while Ethan's heart failed. Keene looking angry not because she broke protocol, but because she broke the outcome. Hale's voice was low. "Why would Keene help you?" Ward closed his eyes briefly as an agent tightened the cuffs. "Ambition is the easiest sedative in medicine. It makes people sleep through anything." Voss rose. "Get him up." The agents hauled Ward to his feet. Ava watched him steady himself, still trying to gather dignity around a body that had betrayed him under pressure. As they moved him past her, he stopped long enough to speak in a voice meant only for her. "Night glass was never buried as deep as you needed it to be." Ava looked at him. For a moment she saw the field hospital again. Heat. Dust. Men calling for medics. A system built to save them turning its face away. Then she saw the present. Hale. Voss. The agents. The sealed canister. The hospital still standing above them. Patients still alive because people had moved fast enough. Her voice came out steady. "Deep enough for you to trip over it." Ward's eyes hardened. The agents pulled him away. Ava turned toward the access room, toward the open water port now guarded by federal hands, toward the injured operative being secured toward the steam thinning in the pipe chase lights. Voss came beside her. "You need medical evaluation." Ava looked down the passage. "I need to see Nora. After evaluation." Ava started walking. Voss sighed once and walked with her. Hale fell in on Ava's other side. His phone buzzed before they reached the radiology door. He answered, listened, and his expression changed in a way Ava did not like. She stopped. Hale lowered the phone. "Keene is gone from the ER." Voss turned to her radio. Ava looked toward the stairwell. Her ribs hurt. Her shoulder throbbed. Her hands were shaking now just slightly with the delayed cost of staying steady too long, but her voice did not shake. "Then we find the doctor who tried to let Ethan die. Keene was gone from the ER, but he had not left the hospital. Ava knew that before anyone confirmed it. Men like Simon Keene did not run into rain with federal agents at the doors. Navy personnel on the roof and every exit locked under emergency authority. He was a doctor. He knew controlled spaces. He knew where people looked during crisis, and more importantly, where they did not. The ER would be searched first, the parking garage second, the doctor's lounge, locker room, stairwells, and ambulance bay after that. Keene would know those patterns because he had worked in them for years. Ava stood at the end of the radiology corridor with one hand pressed lightly to her ribs and looked toward the elevators. Voss was already speaking into her radio, her voice low and clipped. Simon Keene. ER physician. White male, mid-40s, Navy Scrubs Hospital ID. Do not approach alone. Detain and hold. Hale listened to his phone with his jaw locked. Ava barely heard either of them. She was back in Trauma Bay 3. Ethan on the table, skin gray, blood under him. Monitor slipping toward silence. Keene's voice cutting across the room. Nurse Carson step away from the patient. Not panic, not uncertainty, an order. Ava closed her eyes once and let the memory replay without emotion, because emotion blurred edges and edges mattered. Keene had stood near the foot of the bed, not close enough to work, close enough to block. He had looked at the clock twice. He had asked whether cardiothoracic had been paged even though everyone already knew the answer. He had told Dr. Lowell to wait. He had used the word authorization 3 times. He had not been afraid Ethan might die. He had been waiting for it. Ava opened her eyes. "He is not trying to leave," she said. Voss lowered her radio. "What makes you sure he delayed Ethan's care? He accessed my file. He helped Ward place people inside the hospital. If Ward is in custody, Keene becomes the cleanest remaining link to the clinical side." Hale looked at her. "He will destroy evidence. Not from his office. Federal teams will be there already." Then, where Ava looked down the hall toward the internal elevators, Medical Records has a live archive terminal on the 2nd floor, but that access would log under his name. Pharmacy has controlled audit trails. The ER med station is watched now. Voss waited. Ava looked toward the older part of the building, the morgue. One of Voss's agents frowned. The morgue Ava was already moving. It has an isolated dictation terminal for death documentation and old transfer records. Low traffic at night, badge access, refrigerated storage, and no one runs toward the morgue during a mass casualty scare unless they have to. Hale's face changed. Ethan was supposed to die. Yes. Ava pushed through the service door. If Keene prepared a death record in advance, or altered intake notes to make the delay look reasonable, that is where he would clean it. Voss spoke into her radio as they moved. "Teams to basement morgue corridor. Quiet approach. Hold outside until we arrive." The hospital felt different on the way down. The first attack had been in the air. The second had been in the water. Now the threat was paper records, timestamps, signatures, clean words arranged to cover dirty choices. Ava had seen it before. Not every battlefield smelled like smoke. Some smelled like toner coffee and fear sweat under fluorescent lights. They took the east stairwell down. Each step made Ava's ribs protest. She let the pain sharpen her. Hale noticed but did not tell her to stop. Voss noticed too, and her expression said she was saving the argument for later. The basement corridor outside the morgue was colder than the service level. The walls were painted a pale institutional green that made everyone look slightly unwell. A metal cart sat empty near a supply room. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant refrigeration and old concrete. 2 federal agents waited at the corner. One whispered, "Badge log shows Keene entered 6 minutes ago." No exit. Voss nodded. "Camera offline for maintenance." Ava gave a humorless breath. "Of course it is." Voss looked at the agents. "Hold here." Ava stepped past her. Voss caught her arm gently but firmly. "You are injured." Ava looked down at the hand, then back at Voss. "Keene knows your agents are coming. He does not know I am. After tonight, everyone knows you are coming. He still thinks of me as a nurse he outranks." Voss held her gaze for 1 second longer, then released her. "Do not make me regret this," Ava said. "You already chose that when you followed me." The morgue door opened with a soft magnetic click. Inside, the cold came first. The room was wider than it looked from the hall. Stainless steel drawers lined one wall. A prep table sat under a rectangular light that was switched off, leaving the space half lit by the glow of a computer monitor in the adjoining records alcove. The refrigeration units hummed in a low, steady note. Ava stepped in quietly. Keene stood at the terminal. He had removed his ID badge and set it on the desk beside a small drive. His scrub sleeves were pushed up. His hair was damp at the temples. The man who had barked orders in Trauma Bay 3 was gone. This man looked smaller, Not sorry, just cornered. He saw Ava reflected in the dark edge of the monitor. His hands froze over the keyboard. "You should be with a medic," he said. Ava stopped 10 feet away. "You should be with federal agents." Keene turned slowly. His eyes flicked toward the door behind her, calculating. "There are agents in the hall," Ava said. His mouth tightened. "Then why are you in here alone? Because you still need to explain something." Keene laughed once. It was thin and ugly. "You want an apology?" "No." "Good. I was going to disappoint you." Ava looked at the screen behind him. Open files, trauma intake, time of arrival, physician note drafts, a death certificate template minimized at the bottom. There it was, clean language waiting for a dead Marine. "You wrote his death record before he died," Ava said. Keene's jaw flexed. It was a contingency document. It was an expectation. "You do not understand what was happening." Ava took one step closer. "Then use small words." Keene's face flushed. That was the old reflex. The insulted doctor. The man who needed hierarchy the way weak lungs needed oxygen. "You think this is about ego," he said. "It was in the trauma bay. In the trauma bay, I was managing risk. You were managing a murder." Keene flinched at the word, then hid it under anger. Ethan Rourke was not some innocent kid in uniform. He was carrying classified material that could destabilize operations across multiple agencies. He was 25 and bleeding. He was a leak. Ava stared at him. The morgue hummed around them. Keene's voice rose slightly. "You think Ward is the only one who understood the stakes? Do you think hospitals are clean places? Do you think medicine is protected from politics because we wear scrubs and say comforting things to families?" Ava's voice stayed level. "I think you let a patient die if no one stops you." "He was not your patient." Ava stepped closer again. "He was on my table." Keene looked at her with open contempt now. "That is the problem with people like you. Corpsmen, nurses, field medics. You confuse proximity with authority." "No," Ava said. "You confuse authority with courage." His hand moved toward the desk. Ava saw it. Not fast enough to be an attack. Too careful to be nothing. "Do not," she said. Keene froze. Ava looked at the small drive beside his badge. "What is on it, insurance? Against Ward, against everyone. That includes you." Keene smiled, but there was sweat at his hairline. "You really do not know how this works, do you? People like Ward do not vanish because one federal agent makes an arrest in a hospital basement. Networks survive. Files disappear. Witnesses become confused. Careers end quietly." Ava thought of her own sealed file, the discharge summary, the blank spaces where names should have been, the years of being told silence was protection. "No," she said softly. "Some witnesses get tired." Voss entered behind her with 2 agents. Keene's eyes shifted. Voss said, "Step away from the terminal, Dr. Keene." Keene lifted his hand slowly. "You are making a mistake." Voss walked to the desk and picked up the drive with gloved fingers. "People keep telling me that tonight." An agent moved in and secured Keene's wrists. The doctor did not resist, but his voice sharpened as the cuffs closed. She performed an unauthorized surgical procedure. She assaulted personnel. She contaminated evidence. She has a classified history that makes her judgment questionable. Ava said nothing. Voss turned from the terminal. "Dr. Keene, I have a dying Marine's pre-written death certificate open on your screen. Unauthorized file access logs tied to your credentials communications between your device and Ward's contractor network, and 2 witnesses who heard Ward name you as an active participant." Keene's face had gone gray. Voss stepped closer. "So I would conserve your legal strategy." They led him toward the door. As he passed Ava, he stopped. For 1 second, the morgue felt as cold as the desert night she had spent holding pressure on a wound that would not stop bleeding. Keene leaned slightly toward her. "You think they will thank you? They will use you until you become inconvenient again." Ava looked at him. Maybe. That answer unsettled him more than any denial could have. She added, "But Ethan is alive. The agents took Keene out." When the door closed, the room seemed to exhale. Voss stood at the terminal scrolling through files. Hale entered and stopped beside Ava. "Your read was right." Ava looked at the minimized death certificate on the screen. "No. Ethan's pulse was right. I just listened to it." Hale watched her for a moment. His expression carried things he did not say, and Ava was grateful for that. Gratitude spoken too early could feel like pressure. He seemed to know. Voss unplugged the terminal and bagged the drive. "I need you upstairs," she said. "For a statement. For medical evaluation first, then statement." Ava looked toward the door. "Nora." Voss sighed. "Fine. Nora first, then medical evaluation, then statement." Ava gave her the smallest nod. That was almost flexible. Do not get attached. By the time they reached the second floor, Hawthorne Ridge had entered the strange afterphase of disaster. The alarms were fewer now. Voices had lowered. People still moved quickly, but the raw edge of panic had dulled into exhaustion and procedure. Hazmat teams in sealed suits moved through the East Wing with containment cases and testing equipment. Federal agents marked doors. Hospital security stood aside, chastened by the fact that for once they had no script to follow. Nurses continued to do what nurses did. They checked vitals, hung fluids, reassured families, found blankets, answered call lights, and kept life moving one room at a time. Ava stopped outside Nora's room. Through the glass, Nora lay propped against pillows with a bandage at her temple and an oxygen cannula under her nose. Her eyes were open. That alone loosened something in Ava's chest. Nora saw her and frowned. Ava stepped inside. Nora's voice came out rough. "You look awful." Ava pulled the chair closer and sat carefully. "You look like you lost a fight with a hallway. Did I win?" "The hallway is in custody." Nora tried to laugh and winced. "Good." For a moment, neither woman spoke. The room held the soft sounds of recovery. Oxygen whispering, monitor beeping, rain tapping faintly against the window. Somewhere outside, a nurse explained to a family that the danger had passed, but the floor would remain restricted for now. Nora looked at Ava's wrapped ribs, the bruising starting near her collarbone, the cut across her palm. "They fired you." "Yes. Then you saved the hospital." Ava looked down at her hands. "I had help." "I did not say you did not." Nora studied her with tired eyes. "You know what I remember." Ava looked up. "I remember you asking if Ethan was stable before you asked about your job. I remember you telling that young nurse to breathe. I remember you walking toward every bad sound in this building like it had called your name." Ava leaned back carefully. "It did." Nora's face softened. "Yeah, I figured." The door opened behind them. Strickland stood there. He had changed in the last few hours. Not morally. Ava did not believe people transformed that fast, but fear had stripped polish off him. His suit jacket was gone. His tie hung loose. A red mark circled one wrist where the zip tie had bitten skin. His face carried the exhausted disbelief of a man who had finally seen the machinery behind the contracts he signed. Voss stood behind him, not forcing him, not protecting him either. Strickland looked at Nora first, then Ava. "I asked to speak with you." Nora said, "That sounds unfortunate for us." Ava did not smile. Strickland swallowed. "I was wrong." The words came out stiffly, like he had not used them often and did not know where they fit in his mouth. Ava said nothing. He looked at her badge pocket empty now. When I terminated you, I believed I was protecting this institution. Nora closed her eyes. Oh, Owen. He flinched. Ava's voice was quiet. You were protecting yourself. Strickland looked down. Yes. The room settled around that single word. He continued. I approved vendor access without adequate review. I tabled security concerns because the contract was valuable and because Dr. Keene assured me the risk was overstated. I allowed administrative fear to outrank clinical judgment. Nora said, You did more than allow it. You taught it. Strickland looked at her. Nora's voice remained weak but clear. You taught people to think twice before speaking. You taught nurses that protecting patients could cost them their jobs. You taught doctors like Keene that a delay could hide behind a policy. Ava watched Strickland absorb it. Not fully. Not yet. Maybe never. But enough to make him look older. He turned to Ava. I cannot undo what I did. No, Ava said. I will tell the board your firing was improper. That is not enough. I know. Ava stood slowly. Pain pulled at her ribs, but she stayed upright. You owe the patients transparency. You owe the staff protection. You owe every nurse on nights a written policy that says clinical escalation is not insubordination when a life is actively failing in front of them. Strickland stared at her. Voss, behind him, said nothing. Ava stepped closer. And you owe Nora a public apology. Nora lifted one hand weakly. I would also accept better staffing ratios. For the first time all night, something almost human passed through the room. Not humor, exactly. Relief in the shape of it. Strickland nodded. Then Voss touched his shoulder. That is enough for now. She let him out. Nora watched the door close. He is still going to try to sound noble in the board meeting. Yes, Ava said. You should ruin that for him. I am planning to breathe through the next hour. That too. A medic appeared in the doorway with the expression of a woman who had been sent 3 times and ignored twice. Ms. Carson, I have direct orders from Agent Voss Admiral Hale and Nurse Maddox to examine you now. Ava looked at Nora. Nora closed her eyes again. I gave the order from a hospital bed. It has extra weight. Ava stood. The medic pointed down the hall. Exam room 4. Ava went. The evaluation was brief only because Ava refused to make it longer, and the medic had enough sense to choose the fight she could win. 2 bruised ribs, deep shoulder contusion, strained thigh, laceration on the left palm, no signs of pneumothorax, no active bleeding, no neurological deficit beyond the fact that Ava was still trying to walk around after a night that would have flattened most people. The medic wrapped her ribs and cleaned her hand. This will hurt more tomorrow. Ava looked at the wall. It usually does. Do not lift anything heavy. Ava said nothing. The medic looked up. That was an instruction, not a suggestion. I heard you. That was not agreement. No. The medic taped the dressing harder than necessary. Ava accepted that. At 4:38 a.m., she gave her first statement in the administrative conference room. The room had become a federal command post. Laptops, evidence bags, maps, empty coffee cups, printed access logs, and faces lit by screens. Outside the glass wall, hospital board members had begun arriving in clothes chosen too quickly. Some looked frightened. Some looked angry. A few looked like they were already rehearsing distance from the disaster. Voss sat across from Ava with a recorder between them. Hale stood near the window speaking quietly to someone in Washington. Ava told the night from the beginning, not dramatically. She gave times, positions, symptoms, names. Ethan's arrival, Keen's delay, the incision, Strickland's firing, the helicopter, Hale's disclosure, the intercom, the East Wing symptoms, the server alcove, Parker, Caleb, the ventilation shutdown, Nora's message, Strickland's abduction, the water access room, Ward, Keen. Voss interrupted only when precision required it. When Ava finished, the sky outside the conference room windows had begun to pale. Morning came without asking permission. Hawthorne Ridge looked worse in daylight. The emergency lights seemed harsher. The wet floors showed footprints. The staff looked older, but the hospital was still alive. At 6:12 a.m., Ethan Rourke woke up. Ava was not in the ICU when it happened. She was in the hallway outside arguing with a vending machine that had taken her dollar and refused to give her coffee. Hale stepped out of Ethan's room and found her pressing the coin return with unnecessary force. "He is asking for the nurse," Hale said. Ava looked at him. Which nurse? Hale's face softened by a degree. The one who put his heart back on schedule. Ava looked through the glass. Ethan lay pale against the pillows, chest-bandaged tubes in his arms, monitors tracking each fragile proof that he remained in the world. His eyes were open. Young eyes. Tired, confused, alive. Ava entered quietly. Ethan turned his head. "You?" "Ava." "Yes." His voice was rough. "My uncle said you saved me." Ava stood near the foot of the bed. "A lot of people worked on you." "Did a lot of people reach into my chest?" Ava glanced at Hale. Hale looked elsewhere. "No," she said. Ethan breathed carefully, then gave the smallest smile. "Then I will start with you." Ava moved closer. "How is your pain bad? That means you are alive enough to complain. Marine Corps prepared me for that." She checked the monitor out of habit. His rhythm was steady. Pressure supported but improving. Color better than before. Still critical. Still here. Ethan's eyes found hers again. They said Dr. Keen was involved. Ava did not answer at once. "He tried to let me die," Ethan said. Ava pulled the blanket a little higher over his arm. "He failed." Ethan swallowed. "I had names. We have them now. All of them." Ava looked at Hale. Hale stepped closer. "We have enough to start the arrests." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Good." His hand moved on the sheet. Ava thought he was reaching for the call button, but he caught her wrist instead. Weak grip. Determined. "My sister," he whispered. Rosa Hale said, "She is on her way." Ethan looked at Ava. "If she cries, tell her I was brave." Ava looked at him for a moment. Then she said no. His eyes opened wider. "No, I will tell her you were scared and stayed alive anyway." "That is better." Ethan stared at her. Then he nodded once. "Okay." Ava gently freed her wrist. "Rest." As she turned to leave, he said, "Nurse Carson." She looked back. "Glad you got fired." Hale's eyebrows lifted. Ethan managed another faint smile. "Seems like it freed up your schedule." Ava looked at him for a second, then shook her head and left before her face could betray her. The board meeting began at 7:03 a.m. Ava did not attend because she wanted to. She attended because Nora sent a text from her hospital bed that said, "Do not let him use passive voice." The conference room was full now. Board members, legal counsel, federal representatives, the interim chief medical officer, Voss, Hale. Strickland at the far end of the table, no longer seated at the head. That mattered. Ava stood near the wall, arms folded carefully because her ribs did not allow any better posture. Strickland began with a prepared statement. He spoke of unprecedented events, complex failures, security vulnerabilities, and decisions made under pressure. Ava listened until the third sentence tried to float responsibility into the ceiling. Then she said, "Who made the decision to fire me?" The room went silent. Strickland looked at her. "I did. Say that in the statement." Legal counsel shifted. Ava did not look at him. "Who tabled the security review?" Strickland's voice lowered. "I did. Say that too." One board member, a woman with pearl earrings and no sleep in her eyes, leaned forward. "Ms. Carson, this board is not hostile to your position." Ava looked at her. This board employed a director who ignored security warnings, empowered a doctor who conspired with a defense contractor, and punished a nurse for saving a patient. "I am not worried about hostility. I am worried about habit." No one answered. Voss placed a folder on the table. "Federal findings are preliminary but sufficient for immediate administrative action. Director Strickland is suspended pending full review. Dr. Simon Keene has been taken into custody. All vendor contracts tied to environmental systems data access and emergency maintenance are frozen. Hawthorne Ridge will remain under federal medical infrastructure supervision until cleared." Hale added, "The Navy will assume protective oversight for Lance Corporal Rourke and any evidence related to Project Nightglass." The woman with pearl earrings looked at Ava again. "What are you asking from this institution?" Ava thought of Nora, of the young nurse holding atropine with trembling hands, of Ethan's blood, of the badge on the counter, of every person who had ever swallowed a warning because rent was due and Power wore a suit. Reinstate every staff member punished for raising safety concerns in the last 2 years. Independent review of clinical escalation policies. Written protection for nurses who act in good faith during immediate life threat. Full disclosure to affected patients and families. And no more burying internal security reports because they make contracts uncomfortable. Strickland looked down at the table. The board chair nodded slowly. "Those requests will be entered into emergency session." Ava's voice cooled. "They are not requests." That was when Voss smiled. Only slightly. By noon, the story had begun to leak. Not all of it. Not Nightglass. Not the details that would pull classified threads into public light before investigators were ready. But enough. A Marine had been saved. A nurse had been fired. A federal investigation had locked down Hawthorne Ridge overnight. A hospital director had been suspended. A doctor had been arrested. 3 patients had suffered chemical exposure and were expected to recover. No one said mass casualty attack. Not yet. But the families knew something had passed close to them in the dark. Ava spent the afternoon moving between rooms, though she was no longer officially on duty and had been told several times to sit down. She checked on Nora. She checked on the 3 exposed patients. She checked on Ethan. She stood outside the pediatric waiting area for 2 minutes because the sound of a child laughing there felt so ordinary, it hurt. At 3:19 p.m., Hale found her in the chapel. It was a small room near the old wing meant for all faiths, and none with soft chairs. A wooden table, a box of tissues, and a stained glass window that turned the gray afternoon into muted blue and gold. Ava sat in the back row, not praying, not sleeping, just still. Hale sat 2 chairs away. For a while, neither spoke. Then he said, "Ward is being transported under federal guard. Keene is talking already. Caleb's drive is real. 3 hospitals identified. 2 arrests underway as of an hour ago." Ava looked at the window. "Good. Ethan asked for Rosa. She arrived 20 minutes ago." Ava nodded. "He will be glad." Hale folded his hands. "I owe you more than thanks." "No, you do not." "Yes," he said. "I do." She looked at him then. He held her gaze. "What happened to you after Zaran should not have happened?" Ava's face closed. Hale continued anyway, carefully. "I cannot undo it. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise, but I can reopen the record." The chapel felt suddenly smaller. Ava looked away. "The record is not what wakes me up." "No," Hale said. "But it matters." She said nothing. He reached into his coat and placed a simple card on the chair between them. Agent Voss is forming a medical infrastructure protection unit, Federal Military Civilian Hospital Systems. She wants you as a consultant. Ava looked at the card but did not pick it up. I have a job. You were fired. I was busy. Hale's mouth shifted. Your reinstatement is being processed. That was fast. Strickland was not in a strong negotiating position. Ava leaned back, eyes on the stained glass. What does Voss want? Someone who understands how hospitals actually breathe. Someone who knows what happens when a policy meets a body. Someone who has seen night glass from the inside and survived enough of it to recognize the shape when it comes back. Ava closed her eyes. She had spent years wanting the past to stay behind her. She had chosen night shifts, small routines, quiet apartments, groceries bought after midnight, no photos on social media, no stories with names attached. She had mistaken being unseen for being safe. Last night had proved the difference. Hale stood. Keep the card or throw it away. Your choice. He moved toward the door. Ava spoke before he left. Admiral? He turned. Tell Ethan I will check his incision before I go. Hale nodded. I will warn him. When he was gone, Ava sat alone with the card beside her. She did not touch it for a long time. 1 week later, Hawthorne Ridge smelled like fresh paint and burnt coffee. The lobby glass had been cleaned. The East Wing had reopened under supervision. New access readers had appeared on service doors. Federal notices sat discreetly at security stations. The bronze donor plaque remained, but someone had placed a temporary sign beside the nurses' station announcing an independent patient safety review. Nora said the sign was ugly. Ava said ugly was fine if it was honest. Nora had returned to the floor for 4 hours at a time against everyone's advice except her own. She wore a bandage at her temple and moved slower than usual, which made her twice as dangerous because people assumed weakness until she opened her mouth. Ava arrived just before 7 p.m. Not through the staff side door, through the front entrance. She wore clean navy scrubs under a black jacket. Her ribs still hurt when she breathed deeply. Her left palm was healing under a strip of fresh gauze. She had slept badly, eaten badly, and ignored 3 calls from numbers she did not recognize. The lobby quieted when she walked in. Not completely. Hospitals never quiet completely. A baby cried near registration. A printer jammed. Someone coughed into a sleeve. But the staff who saw her paused. The young nurse from the East Wing stood behind the desk with a chart in her hands. She smiled first. Small, nervous, real. Ava nodded back. Nora waited at the ER entrance with a badge in one hand. You are late. Ava looked at the clock. I am 4 minutes early. After saving the building, we raised expectations. Nora tossed the badge. Ava caught it. Her name was printed in clean black letters. Ava Carson, RN Emergency Department. Beneath it, someone had added a temporary laminated strip. Clinical Emergency Authority Review Board. Ava looked at Nora. Nora shrugged. Board wanted a long title. I wanted Combat Goblin. We compromised badly. Ava clipped the badge to her scrub top. The weight of it was small. It was also not. Across the ER, Dr. Patel looked up from a chart and gave her a solemn nod. Doctor. Lowell approached with coffee in one hand and an expression of awkward sincerity. I wanted to say he began. A trauma radio crackled before he could finish. Everyone turned. Dispatch came through sharp and clear. Multiple vehicle collision on Route 17. 3 patients inbound. 1 critical. ETA 4 minutes. The ER changed instantly. Not with panic, with purpose. Nora pointed to 2 nurses. Trauma 1 and 2. Respiratory on standby. Blood bank notified. Move. Dr. Lowell set down his coffee. A younger nurse froze for half a second near the supply cart. Ava saw it. She walked over, not fast, not slow. "What is your name?" The nurse swallowed. "Kim. Kim, look at me." Kim did. Ava's voice softened. "Breathe first, move second. Think the whole time." Kim inhaled. Ava handed her a pair of gloves. "Good. Now get the pressure bags." Kim moved. The ambulance bay doors opened. Rain blew in cold and clean. For one brief second, Ava stood beneath the bright trauma lights and felt the whole building around her. The vents overhead, the water lines in the walls, the monitors, the carts, the doors, the people. Not safe. Never completely, but alive. The first stretcher came through the doors. Ava stepped forward.